o'clock, and today is October 23rd. And I would like to welcome everybody here in the Baker meeting room and those online to this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Sarah, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Bittner?
Here.
Commissioner Field?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Larson?
Here.
Commissioner Lukens? Commissioner Schell?
Here.
Commissioner Schmitz? Commissioner Sivak?
Here.
Commissioner Wangen?
Here.
Commissioner Zent?
Here.
Chair Schwartz?
Here, thank you. With that, we'd have just one request this evening before we start our meeting. Dakota Media Access, at our last meeting, had some difficulty hearing us and picking up our discussions during the meeting. So just a reminder to make sure that you pull your mic a little bit closer and be sure and turn it on so that things can be picked up. And the same for the folks that are online. Make sure that you're close enough to whatever you're speaking into to make sure that it is picked up. So that would be much appreciated. With that, we're going to pass the first item on our agenda this evening, which is approval of minutes. We don't have them ready, so we will have them ready for our next meeting. So we'll move on to our consent agenda. And we have a number of items on our consent agenda this evening, all of which the recommendation is a call for public hearing. The first being public notice on signs, the second being Washington Square Edition, Lot 1 and 3 in Block 1. The third being Kilburn North Edition, first replat, Lot 1 and 2, Block 1. I'm sorry, I should be indicating a zoning map amendment. The first two were the public notice for signs was a zoning text amendment. The Washington Square Edition was a zoning map amendment. The Kilburn North Edition first replat was a zoning map amendment. And the Huker Park Edition was a zoning map amendment. And then realignment of the future Rocky Road is a major street plan amendment. Now again, staff is recommending a call for public hearing on all of those items. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Zent has made a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Johnson. Any discussion? And not hearing or seeing any, Sarah, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Sivak?
Yes.
Commissioner Field?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wangen?
Yes.
Commissioner Larson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lukens?
Yes.
Commissioner Schell?
Yes.
Commissioner Bittner?
Yes.
Commissioner Zent?
Yes.
Chair Schwartz?
Yes, the motion is approved. With that, we'll move on to our regular agenda this evening, and we have 4 items on our regular agenda. The first being is Arrive 2050, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And I believe we have Rachel here to give us a briefing on this evening.
Yes, thank you, Chair Schwartz. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Rachel Lukashevsky, and I am the Executive Director for the Bismarck-Mandan Metropolitan Planning Organization. Tonight I'm here to introduce the MPO's consultant, who is Jason Carby of HDR. He is online with us. And I'm also here to introduce the Arrive 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Arrive 2050 is a major planning document, and it assists the MPO, our local jurisdictions, which includes the City of Bismarck, and the North Dakota Department of Transportation to envision and prepare for the future of our local transportation network. More specifically, it helps the local municipalities to use federal transportation dollars to improve our network, either by expansion or maintenance. We've been working on this project for over a year and a half, and Jason's presentation will provide you with the outline of how we prepared for the study, how we used public input throughout the process, and what overarching goals, development themes, and grant projects we would hope to pursue upon possible acceptance of the master plan. In conclusion, the MPO is requesting that the board consider a motion to recommend acceptance of the plan to the City Commission. The MPO did advertise this as a public hearing, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you have after Jason's presentation.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Rachel. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I coming through all right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all. Appreciate your time tonight. So I wanted to give a high-level overview of the plan, just kind of what's in there, and then, like Rachel said, answer any questions that you all might have. We've got 11 chapters in there, and my goal here is to kind of walk through kind of a high-level overview of what's in each of those chapters as we kind of go through this. So the first chapter kind of talks about the MPO and what the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan is one of the MPO's kind of 4 core work products. It's updated every 5 years. It's really charged to look, 20 years plus, look for kind of existing and kind of upcoming future system needs, and develop what we call a fiscally constrained list of projects. Essentially, given revenue and what our needs are to maintain the system, what are a reasonably expected set of projects that we can use and fund into the future. And this plan was, like I said, arrive 2050, so looking out through the year 2050. So one of the key things that kind of guides this is the goals and objectives, the overview, kind of setting that vision. A lot of the engagement up to this point, and a lot of the other studies that all the different jurisdictions in the MPO area have conducted really help kind of lay the groundwork for this. So we do have some federal requirements that need to be a part of this. And so we have direction. Also, the state of North Dakota has a long-range plan, and that provides some goals for the state system. And so we take those federal and state perspectives, but really put a local twist on it and make sure that, the real vision and the desires of the Bismarck and Mandan and Lincoln community are really reflected in this. And so then we developed some performance measures, ways to see how good a job we're doing at, measuring how we're achieving that vision as we develop this plan. And then, look at the projects on the back end and see, how we did. So there were 8 goal areas in the safety, economics, resiliency, efficiency, and reliability. Maintenance, again, making sure we maintain the system that we have today. Forward thinking, active transportation and transit, and then equity. So a lot of this was founded, as Rachel mentioned, through a pretty broad and multifaceted public engagement approach. We had a lot of online resources. Again, the folks are kind of used to being able to see things when they want, as they need it. And so we've had a project website, a lot of online engagement opportunities. In fact, the public engagement period with an online meeting just wrapped up today, reviewing the draft plan. But we also had pop-up events, public open houses. We were, as you can see there, in the Bismarck YMCA for a couple of different meetings, and then had a meeting over in Mandan, or 2 different meetings over in Mandan as well. And so a lot of opportunity to get some direct conversations with the public and get some feedback on as we went through developing the plan, thoughts and ideas on what that plan should include. Also had some kind of more focused meeting with stakeholders. We had a steering committee made up of technical staff throughout, and then also the MPO's technical advisory committee and policy board were given regular updates. Had a chapter that gave just kind of a snapshot of where the community is today in terms of population, demographics, housing, employment, commute patterns, looking at historical trends as well. And then we had a pretty comprehensive technical analysis of the existing transportation system, looked at it through a lot of different perspectives. You can see here, safety, traffic operations or congestion, freight movement, looked at bicycles, pedestrians, transit, regional connections, and assets. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail of any of these, but I want to give you kind of a snapshot of what's in there. From a safety perspective, we looked at, what the overall trends in the area are in terms of fatal and injury crashes, also bicycle and pedestrian crashes. But then in addition to kind of summarizing regional trends, We also got down and looked at, where are the most frequent crashes occurring, and, how can we maybe come up with some ideas to mitigate some of those. Also looked at congestion and got really specific about, where areas of congestion are on the network. Overall, again, from these perspectives, we see, crashes are happening along higher volume corridors. We do have some periods of congestion as we look to the future, anticipate more coming. Really focusing on making sure we've got those freight, bicycle, and pedestrian and transit connections. Really, at all the areas, all the different jurisdictions, the cities, the counties do a good job of really focusing on maintaining the system that we've got today. And one of those other really key focus areas was cross-area travel. We've got some barriers to continuous corridors. In Bismarck, we've got some barriers just through natural geography and some development, just north-south travel. And on the Mandan side, we had more of an east-west travel barriers. So as we went through this, we kind of focused on what types of strategies might long-term try to mitigate some of those. Look to the future and kind of identified, how much growth we anticipate, where that growth might happen. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail here, but again, the past has demonstrated that this is a rapidly growing community, and anticipate that continuing on through the year 2050. And so really looked at those areas where we thought we'd see more jobs and where we'd see more housing, and how that really translated into where those future travel needs might start to arise. And so really you can see here, we've got a map of kind of showing where we're anticipating the darker brown and the darker orange is where we anticipate more traffic popping up. And then kind of just looking at how that impacts the overall system, more trips, longer trips, and how that all translates into additional congestion, and where we really need to start thinking ahead about maybe providing some new transportation connections or enhanced transportation connections in the future. And so that would kind of set the baseline for where we are today and where we're going in the future. And looked at all those different potential improvements that might be warranted in the future, and start kind of going through that process of identifying those. We've got this kind of exhaustive list of potential projects that's included in the plan. A lot of these are great ideas. But when you start looking at how much funding we've got and what's happening with like construction costs, we can't afford to do all of them. So it had to go through this process of looking at how much growth we've got in transportation revenues, how much costs are going down, and as we get or how much costs are going up, and as we get longer into the future, we've got long-term purchasing power that's kind of dropping. And so looked at all those anticipated revenue streams from different sources and different programs, both state and local, and federal, and came up with a fiscally constrained list. And so a lot of our projects on this fiscally constrained list started to really focus on some due to some funding changes with how North Dakota DOT is providing funding to the MPO, that we needed to kind of identify projects that were more focused on the maintenance side. And so we've got a lot of kind of mill and overlay and some reconstruction projects. In addition to, we've got sources of funding that are dedicated to like trail and bicycle and pedestrian type work, and so identified some of those, and also identified some intersections that would be more near-term kind of safety type projects. You see the safety project shown there as well. And so in addition, so that's what we've got for our fiscally constrained. We also have a list of projects that's a good idea, and we want to continue to find opportunities to try to identify funding sources to pay for those. And then the last chapter is really focusing on making sure, again, these are required by US DOT and the federal government every 5 years. Wanted to demonstrate how we have this locally tailored plan, but it also aligned with federal requirements. And so that was a very high level overview of an exhaustive planning process and draft report. And I guess with that, I will ask for any questions you might have.
Commissioners, questions for Jason? I'm not seeing or hearing any, Jason. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you so much for your overview this evening.
Appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
Rachel, did you want to?
I was just standing if there were any questions that I could address as well.
Okay, we'll ask the question, and commissioners, questions for Rachel? And I'm not seeing or hearing any, Rachel, so thank you. With that, I'm going to open the public hearing on this agenda item. Are there folks here that would care to come to the podium and speak to it? And I'm not seeing or hearing any, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. With that, commissioners, we have a request in front of us that recommends for a recommendation of acceptance for the Arrive 2050 transportation plan. What are your wishes?
I move to accept the transportation plan as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. We have a motion to accept.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Sivak is going to second things for us. With that, any additional discussion? And I'm not seeing or hearing any, so Sarah, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Field,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lukens,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Sivak,
Yes.
Commissioner Wangen,
Yes.
Commissioner Zent,
Yes.
Commissioner Bittner,
Yes.
Chair Schwartz.
Yes, the motion is approved. With that, we move on to item number B on our regular agenda, which is part of Lincoln Township, Section 22, and Isaac. It is a request for a future land use plan amendment, and Isaac is going to provide us with staff briefing this evening.
Yes, good evening, Chair Schwartz and Commissioners. So this regular agenda item today comes to us from Ski Haven LLP, who are requesting a future land use plan amendment from the Urban Reserve Midterm, or URA, future land use plan designation to the Industrial Flex, or IF, designation to align with some proposed future development in part of Lincoln Township, Section 22, as shown on the map in the next slide here. Yes, so as shown on the map there, it is just kind of to the south of the Imperial Valley subdivision area. It's also located partially south of Bismarck along the north side of 48th Avenue Southeast, between 12th Street Southeast to the west, as well as University Drive over to the east. So this project consists of one part of one tract of land, and this can be kind of thought of as a precursor to a zoning change or any actual development. Should this amendment be approved, the applicant, to staff's knowledge, desires to plat and rezone the project area to facilitate a future outdoor storage use. But again, this is just a future land use plan amendment. Those other things would come later if this were to be approved. The area itself has some adjacent land uses, which include some residential development to the north, that Imperial Valley subdivision there, and then primarily agricultural or undeveloped land surrounding the rest of the area, with some single-family homes kind of sprinkled in there throughout said agricultural areas. As you can see on the screens right now, the area is identified currently as URA, or Urban Reserve Midterm, which are areas that could be suitable for urban development, an unspecified type of urban development, so residential, commercial, or industrial, but they are not projected to be annexed prior to 2045 given current conditions and development trends in the area. The Industrial Flex, which is the proposed change here, are areas that are flexible employment centers for a range of businesses, including storage uses, and would typically not include industries that would generate excessive noise, fumes, hazards, or potential nuisances. The public was notified of this request via publications in the Bismarck Tribune on October 11th and 18th, and 65 letters were mailed to nearby property owners on October 11th, 2024 as well. To my knowledge, staff have not received any written formal comments regarding this request, but we did receive a few inquiries from the public for further information, but once that information was provided, no formal comment was submitted at that time, at the very least. As a cumulative result of all findings contained in the staff reports in front of you, City of Bismarck staff find that the proposed future land use plan amendment would not adversely impact public health, safety, and general welfare, and that it is generally consistent with the comprehensive plan, Bismarck Code of Ordinances, and relevant state law. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the future land use plan amendment from the URA, or Urban Reserve Midterm, to the Industrial Flex land use plan designations. Does the commission have any questions for me at this time?
Commissioners, any questions for Isaac? Commissioner Zen.
Isaac, this isn't in the floodplain or anything, is it?
Sure. If we could go back to just to get the project area on the screen there. So the parcel itself, which is owned by Ski Haven LLP, you can kind of see what it would be based off of the roads or some of the topography there. So the project area specifically that is outlined there is outside of the floodplain. Everything to the west of that area then becomes in the floodplain. So the project area specifically is outside.
Thank you, Commissioner Zand. Commissioners, other questions for Isaac? I'm not seeing or hearing any, Isaac.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing on this agenda item. Is either the requester or a representative here to speak to this agenda item? And sir, if you'd put your name on the log, that would be wonderful, and introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Chair and Commission, my name is John Lowry. I'm with Lowry Engineering, and thank you for your time this evening. I'm mostly here to answer questions that or concerns that you may have. I will point out Imperial Valley lagoons do sit on this property, and there is industrial flex currently today to the north and immediately north, which is adjacent to Imperial Valley and east of this property. So from the landowner's perspective, it'd be a very difficult piece to develop as residential given those conditions, and that's part of the reason why the change to industrial flex is being requested. So I'll sign in here, and if there are any questions, please.
Commissioners, questions for John? John, we're going to let you off easy. I don't think anybody has any questions for you.
If anything comes
Thank
up,
you.
I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, the podium is open for others that would care to address this agenda item.
Mr. Chairman and commission members, my name is Arnie Zent. I live in Imperial Valley, and the concern that I have with what has been going on, first of all, I want you to totally understand, I do not oppose any development that's going on in South Bismarck. I think it's wonderful. However, the way things are happening, I have big concerns. The lagoons that's around this project, I've been responsible for controlling noxious weeds. And we've had that under control until berms of dirt have been moved up. And if any of you would go out there and see all the Canadian thistle, it's terrible. So it's an incubator of noxious weeds that are going to produce a lot of seed for next year and just flying around. The same company is doing the development on the east side of Washington, directly north of, I own 40 acres, kitty corner across from that development, and that land has been opened up for 4 years. I farm some hay land that belongs to and owned by Wayne Lintagen, and it's totally destroyed the hay crop with Canadian thistle. And again, I don't oppose construction going on to the south of Bismarck. What I do oppose is people going in there and not putting a cover crop on and maintaining and managing that open ground. Obviously, anything that's going to fly is going to start growing and produce seeds. So again, my name is Arnie Zent. I'll write this down. And is there any questions that you have of me?
Commissioners, questions for Arnie?
Thank you very much.
Arnie, thank you for stepping to the podium. The podium is open for others that would care to address this agenda item.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Barbara Cook, and similar to what Mr. Zent has addressed, we own property just to the east of this proposed project area, and we own property just to the south of the property that's being developed on the corner of Burley and Washington. And I can attest to the weed problem on both sides. It probably was in the last 3 weeks that they came and mowed, but of course the thistles had already blossomed and spread, and our yard is horrible. Our garden is full of thistles, and it really is a mess. I'm also wondering what the access to this project area is. I noticed, and I'm not sure if this is adjacent to the property, that they have been taking dirt out of, soil out of for the last year. It butts up to our property. There is a significant cliff next to our property to the east. And I don't know if they can do that without reclamation. I don't know how they can just be taking soil out. I know that when Northern Improvement owned that part of the property that we now own, they had to reclaim it. They had to fill in all their divots and crevices that after they were getting out the gravel. So those are my questions. And exactly what was the development for? Future storage units? Was that my understanding?
We can get John back up here and we can ask him.
Okay, well, I guess that pretty much explains our concerns.
Commissioners, questions for Barbara? Barbara, my question would be, did you voice your concerns regarding the weeds to any public entity?
I did not.
Okay.
I had
And I guess I would have the same question for Arnie.
I had intended to call Burley County, since that land is now annexed into the city. It's probably city concerns, city weed control that needs to take care of that. I don't know, but I will be voicing that
All right.
to county or probably city. Thank you.
Very good.
Any other questions?
Barbara, any other questions, commissioners? I'm not seeing any. Thank you.
To answer your question, I'm not sure if the land is annexed into the city or not. However, Burley County was without a weed board officer for almost 3 years. So there was nobody that we could talk to help us with control of the noxious weeds. They do have one now, but I'm not sure that, I hope he's still there, but he's trying to get familiar with what his responsibilities are, and so I haven't had a chance to talk to him about this. because I didn't want him to be overwhelmed with all the other things that he has. But that was the reason why I didn't talk to anybody about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then I would ask, John, you stood up before, would you care to come back?
Yeah, as far as the intended use, this opens it up to some light industrial pieces. I think there is some intention to do maybe some exterior storage, but the long-term use of this property is not been determined yet. So, and I can assure you, I don't know the condition of the neighboring property. I do understand the concern. It'd be a concern if I was a neighbor. I think the landowners would probably agree. And I think that's something that, as far as keeping weeds down and being good neighbors, they're good people. They want to do that. So I've notified them, and hopefully they'll be reaching out. If not, we can come to some resolution, I believe. So.
Okay. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Hold on just a moment, please.
What about the site access? Is that coming from the south, I'm assuming?
They do have access to the south. City engineers here, I believe that's a section line road to the east, so there could be some sort of access from there, but there's some grading as well that would need to occur. So they do have current access to the property from the south.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, for following up on that. Commissioners, other questions?
You said there was a cliff
Commissioner
on the side
Sivak?
of the road there. Is there some concern, you guys are familiar with that?
I wouldn't describe it as a cliff. They have done some excavation on the property to use as fill dirt for the Paradise Valley subdivision, and the grading and reclamation of that. That should be part of normal practice and good neighborly practices. So I would expect that of the landowners. I would expect the city to hold them accountable to that, even though, so Paradise Valley is annexed to the city, but this subject property here is not. This is in the city's ET, but so kind of a co-jurisdiction there. So again, I think with some communication though, the noxious weeds and that, as well as the reclamation, can be taken care of. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Sivak. Commissioners, additional questions for John while we have him at the podium? I guess I'm not seeing any more. Thank you.
thank you.
The podium is open for others that would care to address this agenda item. And I'm not seeing or hearing any, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, this is a request for future land use plan amendment. Staff recommendation is to approve. What are your wishes? And actually, before we do that, I should ask Isaac if he has any additional comments.
I would just add one more thing regarding the access to the site. Being in the ETA, that would require an approach permit of some kind from the county highway department, which they may or may not already have, but that would be a question for county highway department, but is their jurisdiction. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you,
But other
Isaac.
than that, no comments.
All right, thank you. With that, Commissioners, again, staff recommendation is to approve. What are your wishes?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Johnson. We have a second from Commissioner Fields. Any additional discussion?
I would just like to
Mr.
thank
Chairman.
the citizens for coming forward this evening, and I do live down in that area as well, and I think that's very valid points that's been brought forward about overall development in the ETA in South Bismarck, and looking at how that is happening and the open land that's been opened up for a very long time without development. So appreciate the citizens coming forward tonight and sharing that opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. Commissioner Bittner, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make note that the concerns about the weeds are duly noted. There was a lack of staff for a while. There's been some issues there, and we do have a new guy on, and I'm sure that he will be following up on that. I don't have that portfolio, but I can assure you that we'll follow up on it, and I'm certain that he'll try to contact somebody from the city in regards to anything that's within the city limits as well. So I just wanted to thank him for bringing that forward and letting us know about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bittner. Commissioners, any additional comments? Discussion? I'm not seeing or hearing any. With that, Sarah, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Wangen,
Yes.
Commissioner Field,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Bittner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lukens,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Seebuck,
Yes.
Commissioner Zent,
Yes.
Chair Schwartz.
Yes, the motion is approved. With that, we'll move on to item C in our regular agenda, which is the 2024 amendments to the growth phasing plan. And Daniel is going to provide us with staff briefing this evening.
Good evening, Chair Schwartz, Planning and Zoning Commission. So we do this every year. We take a look at our growth phasing plan as part of our comprehensive plan, and we just dust it off and make sure it still works for us. The Bismarck is a growing community, so we do grow by about 1.2% per year. That's about 1,000 new people moving into the city of Bismarck, growing in that rate. So the map could be changing every year, so we do review that. There are three basic areas in our growth phasing plan that we look for accommodating the new growth in our area. We have the annexed area, which is number one priority for growth. Outside of the annexed area, we have two expansion priority areas, so priority 2 and priority 3. Both of them are within what we call an urban service area boundary, the area that the city would expect to grow into in the next 25 or so years. So what we do is we study how much land do we have available in these areas, and then we compare that to the projected growth, just to see if the capacity exists to absorb that growth. So inside of the annexed area, you see here on this map, these are all vacant lots. So most of them have been platted, they've been annexed, but they're still vacant. They have not been issued a building permit yet. So within these vacant lots, and they all have various levels of serviceability with utilities. Some are ready to go, some need quite a bit of work. But overall, we can fit probably about 8,000 homes on these areas just within the city limits itself. Now, outside of the city limits, in priority areas 2 and priority areas 3, 2 being areas that are more easily serviced relatively with water, sewer, streets, and then 3 being areas that would require a little extra work to bring in infrastructure. Within those areas, we could expect, or we'd have enough space for about 50,000 additional people. We don't know when. The when is determined by the market and by the developer's interest in growing, but this is just the amount of area that we have that we're looking at. So the question before us today is whether we want to change this map, whether we feel like the growth that we've seen in the last year, we've annexed about 140 acres in the last year, whether that warrants any changes to this map. Staff did review this from engineering, public works, planning, and the other departments. And at this point, we would recommend not changing the map, not changing the plan. We feel like, based on the study, there is sufficient growth in the city limits and in the urban service area boundary for the growth we anticipate. And we'll look again next year and see if anything has changed or warrant any changes. But at this point, we recommend no change. But we'd entertain any questions from you as well as the public hearing to see if that would change anything.
With that, Commissioners, do you have any questions for Daniel? Commissioner Shell.
Daniel, in particular on some of the graphics that show whether the property is platted, serviceable, or I guess maybe platted or serviceable, can you maybe describe maybe the point in time analysis that looks at there might be something that's platted that's on its way to being serviceable, but maybe the project's not done? Can you maybe just elaborate on that so we have a context by which to view this?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Shell. And so in fact, the engineering department is really the source of a lot of this information, so Gabe is really asking for your benefit. So, but I think that is a helpful distinction to make because this map is out there, and I think people should know what we mean by it. So the three categories, serviceable means that a utility improvement district has been created, some sort of contract. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the water and sewer lines are in the ground, but they will be shortly if they're not already. And the building permit could be issued on the assumption that would be ready in time for the utilities. The next level behind that are areas that are platted. However, no street improvement district, utility improvement district has been agreed upon, is in the works. And so those areas have gone through every process that you would look at as a planning and zoning commission, but they really haven't gotten the final go-ahead from engineering to build. And then the areas that are dark orange, I guess, are areas that are annexed, usually for some historic reason, yet they have never been platted. They've never been, for the most part, they're still agriculturally zoned. The big one here is the section owned by the state of North Dakota, Section 36, school section. It has been annexed, but it's still raw land today. So those are the three categories of areas that have been annexed in terms of their readiness for development.
Thank you, Daniel. And maybe I would just add the context that that's a point in time whenever this analysis was performed, and give it another week, and some of those lots that might have been in a platted state might have turned themselves into serviceable if we got to a point that that contract's completed and when we're ready to allow a building permit to be issued. So just taking it with a grain of salt that whatever this is, if you did the analysis again tomorrow, it might look a little bit different, especially on the fringe areas.
Thank you, Commissioner Shell. And Daniel, thank you for the explanation. Commissioners, any additional questions for Daniel before we let him off the podium? I'm not seeing or hearing any, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, the podium is open for those or anyone that would care to address this agenda item. And I'm not seeing anybody out there, so coming to the podium. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, staff, the request is to, I'm going to make sure that I read this right. Based on the above finding, staff recommends no change in the growth phasing plan of Together 2045. And so staff is recommending approval. What are your wishes?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Zant.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Wagon. Any additional discussion? Not seeing or hearing any. Sarah, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Sivak,
Yes.
Commissioner Field,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Wangen,
Yes.
Commissioner Bittner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lukens,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Zent,
Yes.
Chair Schwartz.
Yes, the motion is approved. We'll move on to item D in our regular agenda, Tall Pines Subdivision, Lot 2, Block 1. It's a request for a special use permit. And Jenny is going to provide us with staff briefing this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Society of St. Pius X, on behalf of St. Michael's Catholic Church, is requesting approval of a special use permit for a religious institution on Lot 2, Block 1, Tall Pines subdivision. The property is located northeast of Bismarck, between 52nd Street Northeast and 66th Street Northeast, along the north side of 57th Avenue Northeast. It's approximately 17 acres in size. The property is also zoned conditional RR5 residential, and a religious institution or church is permitted as a special use, provided certain conditions are met. Conditions for approval are included in your packet in the staff report, and according to the information submitted with the application for the special use, all conditions would be met. The site includes a church and a parish house. The future land use plan designates this property in two separate districts, roughly divided by a ridge line. The southeast portion is designated as urban neighborhood. The northwest portion is designated as urban reserve midterm. The proposed religious institution would be located within the urban neighborhood area. These areas are places for quiet enjoyment of home life. The public has been notified of this request. A notice was published in the Tribune on October 11th and 18th, and 25 letters were mailed to the owners of nearby properties on the 11th. To my knowledge, we have not received any comments regarding this request. This request was evaluated according to the standards contained in our comprehensive plan, Bismarck Code of Ordinances, and state law. As a result of all the findings contained in the staff report, staff find that the proposed special use permit would not adversely impact public health, safety, and general welfare. It's been a long day. And consistent with the comprehensive plan, Bismarck Code of Ordinances, and state law. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the special use permit for the religious institution on Lot 2, Block 1, Tall Pines subdivision. Do you have questions?
Commissioners, questions for Jenny? Commissioner Shell.
Jenny, the site exhibit shows 57th Avenue as a constructed road to the south, and then Silbernagle Drive that is yet to be constructed. Would this trigger the construction of Silbernagle Drive, or in the conversations that you've had or that the city has had with county fire, rural fire, and county highway department, they're satisfied with Silbernagle Drive not being in play at this point in time?
Thank you. Great question, Commissioner Shell. Commissioners, Silbernagle Drive would not be required to be constructed with this particular development. There is they dedicated right away with the plat, and Silbernagle will be constructed upon annexation into the city, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shell. Commissioners, other questions for Jenny? I'm not seeing or hearing
Thank you.
any, Jenny. Thank you. With that, I'm going to open the public hearing for this agenda item. Is either the requester or a representative here to speak to the agenda item?
Yes, I'm Chris Hansen. I'm a representative for the church. And not much to say other than the fact of just request that we get this approved and get proceedings. So I'm open to any questions anybody might have.
Chris, thank you for stepping up. Other commissioners, do you have questions? Commissioner Zant.
Shoot.
Yes, would you be looking at this fall yet for starting construction, or next spring, or?
Dan? We have an application in for the building permit this fall still.
Okay.
And the site permit. So, yeah, I keep watching the 30-day weather forecast on things, hoping that we don't get cold weather. So, yeah, that was the intention, was to get footings in. And then it's going to be structural concrete, so we'll be constructing over the wintertime. So with a estimated at currently a completion by like September of next year.
Next year, okay. No, we were just talking about being on borrowed time and with construction, so just thought I'd want to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zant. Commissioners, other questions for Chris? I'm not seeing or hearing any. Chris, thank you. With that, the podium's open for others that would care to speak to this agenda item. And I'm not seeing or hearing anybody, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Jenny, any additional comments?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, Commissioners, this is a request for a special use permit, and staff is recommending approval. What are your wishes?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Bittner.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Wagon. With that, any additional discussion, Commissioners? And I'm not seeing or hearing any, so Sarah, would you please call roll?
Commissioner Field,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lukens,
Yes.
Commissioner Shell,
Yes.
Commissioner Sivak,
Yes.
Commissioner Wangen,
Yes.
Commissioner Bittner,
Yes.
Commissioner Zent,
Yes.
and Chair Schwartz.
Yes, the motion is approved. With that, we move on to other business. And we have one item in our other business this evening, and that is a major street plan overview, and Daniel's going to provide that for us.
Good evening, Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission. So we'd like to give you a little overview of the Major Street Plan. There's no specific decision to make. This is another business. But we get a lot of questions from the public about this plan. Not a lot, but from time to time we do. And we thought it would warrant a little bit of discussion, both for your benefit and also for anyone who may be watching from home and wondering what these lines on a map really mean that we have. So the Major Street Plan is, let's see. There we go. Let me make sure. Okay, good. It is progressing. This was adopted as part of our comprehensive plan in 2022. It does establish arterial and collector roadway corridors throughout the entire ETA, but it is also linked to a broader plan, the Fringe Area Road Master Plan, which includes, it goes further out even, which includes areas within Burleigh County and Morton County and Mandan as part of our region. And so what I'll do is I'll go into a little bit of the history of this and what it does mean. I think it's good to say right off the bat that the plan that you heard earlier from Arrive 2045, it's quite a different plan. That one is a lot more detailed. That one is dealing more so with what it physically gets constructed, who pays for it, how we can fit that within our funding availability, and a lot more of the details of the actual physical construction of the roadway. Really, all this plan is addressing is the location of these future roadways relative to each other. So the connectivity of the roadway network in the future. So one thing I want to emphasize is we have really always had a future street plan in Bismarck. We haven't always called it that, but if you look, and this is pretty interesting, I find this interesting, so maybe you will too. If you look at the original plats that were adopted in the 19th century, they were huge areas. We platted an entire section at a time back then. If you look at Flannery and Weatherby edition, they platted an entire section. They created 1,442 lots in 48 blocks, all in one shot. And so you could probably think of these early plats as future street plans, as well as the primary function of just dividing out land for ownership and right-of-way. But when you look at Flannery and Weatherby in particular, even 20 years after the plat was recorded, we really only had 2 homes that were built within that plat. So they waited 20 years before anything was even constructed. By 30 years later, you start seeing a few more homes being built. 40 years, a few more, 50, it's still growing into this plat. 60 years later, 70 years later, it's mostly built out, most of the blocks, but there's a few blocks that even are still not developed after 70 years later. Finally, 80 years later, you would say this plat has been fully built out. And so this was a long-range plan in addition to being a plat. When you look at the initial grid that was created in the plat, and then 80 years later, when it was finally built, there's a few differences. We built a high school and parks, and we vacated some of that. But for the most part, it's pretty much the same thing. So what we had at that time is we had a roadmap, literally, in the future. And then as we built and as we started building those roads, we knew they would connect because we had that roadmap from the very beginning. Now, the era of big plats didn't last very long. That really only lasted into the 20th century. But by the 20s, we had something called planning. So North Dakota, the North Dakota Planning Act was adopted in 1929. This is what created you, well, half of you. You're a planning and zoning commission, so your zoning side was a little earlier. But in the planning side was created in 1929. And the major street plan shows up in that document. And that's the document that you have that shows how these plans are supposed to connect together. When we were developing big plats, we had landowners who owned a whole section at a time and could do that. As the city developed and grew further, we have a lot more landowners, and a lot more coordination between those landowners is necessary. There's also different design styles, and so before everything was a grid, and for better or worse, now by the 20th century, developers preferred curvilinear streets and have a little more variety than just a grid. So there needed to be some entity making sure it all connected at the end of the day with all the different landowners in the future growth. And you are that entity that had that responsibility and still does. In fact, that language is still in Century Code. The major street plan is still there. And every time you evaluate a subdivision, you are evaluating whether it fits in with that major street plan according to state law. So the first plan that was adopted as a planning commission that I could find was in 1941. They didn't show any new areas outside of city limits. It was all platted areas. But the one thing that was kind of unique about this plan is you see those red lines. For the first time, they started identifying major streets. The original plats, a street was a street. It's all it was. But by 1941, we have proposed thoroughfares. So some streets are different than other streets. Some streets carry more traffic than others. And so we start seeing a hierarchy of streets developing. Now, today, we really have 3 main categories that we use to create a hierarchy of streets. We have the local streets, lots of driveways, lots of access, narrower, slower, and neighborhood streets, or commercial streets in local capacity. We have arterials. You think of the blood vessel system carrying blood from your heart to the body. Those are the big streets that are meant to carry larger volumes of traffic. Collector is somewhere in between. Sometimes collectors are tricky because they could be a little bit of both, but they're intended to collect the traffic from the local system into the arterial. So those are the 3 main categories we look at now. You can also think of these in terms of the scale. So the local really are for the neighborhoods, for the district. Collectors, maybe a whole section is providing the scale of travel. Arterials really are for travel regionally or even statewide. And we also have interstates, which we don't really deal with so much, but that's the nationwide system. But when we look at our major street plan, we're not concerned about locals and we're not concerned about interstates. We actually had master plans in the 60s that had all the local roads shown in the future. You know, when you look at what happened today, that nothing actually ever was built that way, which is fine because at the local level, we don't know really the intention of the local roads is for the neighborhood development. So that actually is perfectly suited for the subdivision at that scale. And the developers wanting access to the lots. So the local roads, there's not much of a public need to look at those in advance. But the arterials and collectors, there are, because that's providing the broader regional travel that we need to make sure is connected at the end of the day. So fast forward a couple more years, I'm almost done here, but we get to 2003 and 2014 where we have a fringe area road master plan. The MPO, our regional entity who we heard from earlier, created these plans to make sure our arterials and collectors are all lined up regionally, and we still have those plans today. In 2022, we have what we use as a major street plan today. The only real difference between the fringe area road master plan and this is that this also includes streets inside of city limits. Fringe area is named fringe area because it's only outside of city limits. This also includes existing streets, and the other one is only planned streets. So otherwise, they're functionally the same. So the only thing I'd like to end on is really emphasizing how the plan fits within the broader development scheme. It really is the very front end. It's the long range for how we anticipate growth happening in the future. The farther you look at it in the future, the hazier it gets. And a lot of these areas may not develop for 50 plus years. We saw Flannery and Weatherby took 80 years to build out that. And so we don't know what the design styles will be like. We don't know. We also don't have the ability to look at such detail as a topography, all of the things that you do need to know for the exact alignment of the roads. So it's a ballpark guesstimate for where that road should be. But the idea is that there should be some connection around here. And if it moves 600 feet or here or there, that's not a problem, as long as we can reserve that ability to connect the road somehow. As we start looking at developing, the subdivision is created, and you look at those all the time, and that sets where the legal roadway will be. One critical point to make is a subdivision is in the hands of the developer, is in the hands of the property owner. If there's no subdivision, no plat, no road gets built. Well, I shouldn't say that. There may be exceptions, there may be abilities to do that through the public sector. However, generally speaking, that's where we get our right-of-way through the subdivision process. So the timing of the development, when these roads are built, is in the hands of the property owner through the subdivision process. And finally, and I won't get into this because it's way outside of my wheelhouse, when you actually look at the geometry of the road inside of the right-of-way, then that's a whole different level of analysis at the engineering level. And more precise. So really, our role as planners is looking at the very fuzzier roadway connections, but making sure we do have some connection made. And that is the intent of the plan. So those lines on the map are not exact, is kind of what I'm trying to say at the end of the day. So that's the overview of this. I can try to answer any questions. If you get really technical, I'll probably have to defer those to engineering, but that's the intent of this meeting. Next month, you will be looking at an amendment to the major street plan, but really, we intentionally kept this very broad, looking at the plan as a whole.
Commissioners, questions for Daniel? Commissioner Zant.
Daniel, I understand the construction and selling of the lots to pay for the roads and stuff. What I get questions on is why do these contractors, construction companies go down our local streets? Who's going to pay for them when they get wrecked? And I'm talking lowboys, caterpillars, dump trucks, all that type of stuff. And I guess that's just taxes and stuff. But I'm in an area that this is happening right now, so that's why I'm getting questions from our neighbors, why they're coming down our streets. So.
Commissioner Shell.
I can take a stab at that one. That was not in the major street plan. That's more of a outside of the scope of that. But I mean, we would have direction. We have truck routes that are assigned as truck routes and ordinances that would say, stay on the truck route as long as you possibly can until you have to get off that truck route, and then you're allowed to drive to wherever you need to, whether it's the UPS vehicle or the moving semi that finds its way meandering in the narrowest of streets to pick up the piano or whatever might be at the guy's house. We try as well as we can. We have a lot more control if it's our contractor working on a city project to control that. We have less control when it's someone building a house somewhere, then we don't have a contract with them, or someone just doing landscaping work and there's not even a permit. We don't even know the activities occurring at the city. Definitely less control over those, but we try to inform all of those users that we know are doing that on an annual basis of where the truck routes are, whether it's now or when we get into our load restriction times in the spring where those roads are really sensitive to the impact. There's not that much damage that vehicle can do. A pickup truck won't do any damage on it, especially here late in the fall when it's dry. We're not really as worried about that as we would find ourselves in the spring when those roads are just a little more sensitive. So don't have an answer for you necessarily, but just note that we do try to communicate that to those entities that have those heavy loads to make sure that they're using the routes that are provided to them as well as they can.
Thank you, Commissioner Schell. Commissioners, additional questions for Daniel? Commissioner Johnson.
I don't know that it's so much a question, but I can understand the city's perspective, but also the landowner's perspective. Like last month, I know it's loose and kind of shows vague intentions, but I would imagine that one landowner that went from having a future road on the south side of his property to something bisecting his property, when he comes to plat, there's going to be some intention that there's going to be an easement through there or a right-of-way through there that's going to achieve that intended road. So there's some pretty significant impacts for a lot of these people, and I can understand where they have concerns and don't really understand what they're looking at. And maybe it's part of the process that should be a little bit more painful, because you're really flushing out a lot of tough, that little area there, that's not an easy connection to be made, that people are not going to be happy regardless of where that future road goes. So maybe this is the more appropriate time to have those tough decisions and tough discussions. So not really a question, just a comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
If I may add, and that's a very important point that I didn't really touch on, but the notification process, and that is something we've had some additional conversations that actually I think have been pretty good since our last meeting, and we have learned that we need to be more clear on exactly what is being proposed in our letters, and so that's something. But you're right. There are difficult decisions to make in some of these cases for the future. They will need to be made at some point because there will need to be a road somewhere. So, and I think one of the purposes of the plan is to have those conversations earlier before it would be too late and you end up having no opportunities for roads because you have a house in the way. So that's kind of the intent, is to have those hard conversations earlier on.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners? Commissioner Schell.
If I can maybe just add, there will need to be a road there eventually, only if they want to develop their property with something. I mean, if their intention is to continue to live out there and hand it out to the next generation, then that road will never exist, and that's probably just fine. It's just when these properties subdivide and increase the density is the time that we need that network to occur. So thankfully, it is a plan that just guides us and the subdivision, the developing community, to know what that network should look like. But really, if it never materializes in that section of land, that's okay too. Like, we're not pushing the issue. We don't need the road until there's people there. So it's good that I guess they just kind of marry each other in that way.
Thank you. Commissioners, other comments or questions for Daniel? Daniel, my only question or comment would be as I looked at this, I wondered how or what came first. Whether the major street plan came first, the MPO studies came first. When you don't think about traffic patterns and roads a lot until you're sitting in traffic. And then those kind of things go through your mind, how it's determined how much traffic is going to go up a particular road, what it can handle and things like that. And so, not a question you can answer, but I think it's good to help with these plans to help clarify where the planning process falls into place and how it takes place.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Zent.
My last comment is I want to thank Daniel for part of the history lesson. I enjoyed that. I really did. And your research on that, I appreciate that. And the only thing I always know is you never become a highway engineer until you get your driver's license. So,
How true. Thank you. Daniel, again, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
With that, Commissioners, is there anything additionally for the good of the commission for this evening? And I'm not seeing or hearing any. So, let's see. Sarah, when is our next meeting scheduled for? I don't see that on the list here.
11:20.
November 20th is our next meeting at 5 p.m. So with that, I thank you for your time this evening, and I adjourn this meeting.